You want me to just go for it? All right. So if you were in the Survey 123 session, you know who I am. But if you weren't, my name's Peter. I had an undergrad in Virginia Tech and I got a master's out of North Carolina State, but I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm going to talk with you about field maps because we have 40 minutes to go through that pretty quickly. So we're going to talk a little bit today about field operations and just what field maps does for you. I talked with one of our colleagues in the last presentation about how each application is different. So field operations within Esri allows you to really just be more effective, more efficient, and more mobile faster than ever. So we want to make sure you get a quick return on investment when your teams are out in the field. So field maps is going to be that map-centric component where you want to view and edit your data. This is that slide I was talking about for you, Paul. You can go ahead and see here, we have a full comprehensive suite of field operations solutions. You can start by collecting data and you can work with the specialized data applications. So Survey 123 is form-centric. Quick Capture is for quick, rapid data collection, just as the name recommends. And then Field Maps is going to be if you want to view. So Field Maps is going to become that comprehensive workflow or comprehensive application in the future. So it's going to be that all-in-one solution. So the strategy currently, and there's some actions on here, so I'm just going to advance all the way to the end, is right now we're going to be rolling in Collector, Explorer, and what is now referred to as location sharing into the Field Maps application. In the future, we're going to be bringing in Workforce and Navigator. Navigators, I believe it's in there in some capacity now, but they're going to get the rest of it migrated in soon. But the Workforce component is especially exciting. So within this application, it will be all in one. And I'm going to say that quite frequently in this presentation. In the future, where you're going to be able to coordinate, plan, and kind of capture your data all in one space. So no more switching between applications over time. So again, the benefits of using field maps, for those of you that have worked with Collector in the past, you open up a survey, it takes you into Survey 123, you complete your workflow, then you open up Navigator and you go to the next application. So we want to make sure that we get you in one space where you can deploy, download, sign in, and complete your work. And you're also going to be able to manage your offline content and update those new features. So there's two components to field maps that I'm going to hit on in today's presentation. The first is going to be how we prepare the data. And the second is going to be the field application itself, right? So before we leave the office, a concept I always talk with my users about is data to maps to apps. And if you've been in one of my presentations, I hope you've heard this. So your data is your field, it's your scheme, it's your domains, it's your attributes, right? But that's visualized and symbolized within a map. All the application does is read that map and provide an easy to use interface behind that. So it allows you to interact with those components that are in the map. So if you want to create a map that has red and green things symbolized for the points, that's where you're going to change that on the map level. So we're going to talk with the mobile application first. Someone asked me earlier, is it available in Windows yet? Not yet. Might be coming, but I can't speak to that right now. But this is going to be for your mobile workers. And your mobile workers are going to have the ability to do just about everything in this application in the future. And right now, they're about 90% of the way there. So you start with the ability to look around, view data, and modify data. So again, compared to Survey 123, where you're just collecting information in a paper form, you have a map there, you have widgets you can navigate to places, view your current workload, and you can also look at location sharing. So we're going to dive into a couple of these as we talk about these mobile applications. So this is a demonstration that we have that I pulled from the UC. So if you've seen this, I'm sorry, but it highlights a couple of good points. Right out of the get-go, you're going to see Field Maps has a lot of maps that read everything in your ArcGIS online account. But in here in particular, we have two offline downloaded areas for Queens and Bronx, right? So the Bronx area was one that was previously created. So if you want to go ahead and download that, we could. But I'm going to be navigating into Queens. So before we enter this map, we want to go ahead and sync up the data set, right? And you can synchronize any changes within that map so we get it all in one space. We also look at location sharing. This map in particular is required for location sharing. So you can guide a user, again, similar to that Survey 123 component where you guide them on what you'd like them to do. Before you access this map, you have to turn this on and say, what duration would you like to see this in? I picked 4-hour intervals, and we picked that just because it makes sense within a work schedule. So you enter the map once you enable that. Up towards the top, we're going to see those geofences, right? These geofences are going to provide quick notifications of what polygons that we're in. Geofences tend to be, you can be hand-drawn polygons, but they can also be assets, which is really cool, or just general polygon layers, such as a flood zone. But we see here right out of the get-go, we can zoom in and we see those color-coded points. So that's that map it's reading with the correct symbolized data. What do I need to do? We're going to be looking at those gray assets. But I can see around me, I have a bunch of green assets, which are already completed, and then orange, which have been completed recently. Up towards the top, you also see the search, legend, and sync in the GPS accuracy. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and click this unit and see really quickly just that information that we're looking at. So we're looking at hydrant 442, 790. And if we scroll down, we can see those attributes. We can see those selected features. So right now, we do see a couple of auto-calculated fields, but we're going to touch a little bit on those later. The demonstration right now is going to be photos, so multiple photos in one space. You can come through, visualize your asset, and kind of get a comprehensive view of what you're going to be expecting out in the field. As you continue to scroll through here, you're going to see down towards the bottom, just all these fields that we need to create. But you can see that inspection count, which is pretty important. So it's counting all of the related records related to that parent attribute, which is pretty neat. You also have the ability to edit your attributes, copy them, which is relatively intuitive. You can delete the asset, but we can kind of remove that component if we'd like. You can collect more information, get directions, or even just gain your orientation as to where this asset is in comparison to your current location. So we scroll back up to the top. I'm going to go ahead and begin editing this asset. So you're going to hit edit. And I think we're going to showcase here just a little bit of the barcode capacity. So I can take a new photo here, but we're going to update a point. And we're going to scan this really secure barcode that we have on this hydrant asset. Actually, not scan it. We're going to take a picture of it. The barcode's next. But you go through and you can update and put it, that current information. So that photo you've taken within the past minute or so, and it just adds it onto the stack that's related to it. You can come down. You can also see as you're editing this information, you're going to see the borough is 4 and the community board is 402. We can edit those assets or that particular field and change that attribute information. But the fun stuff is the precincts, right? This information previously wasn't populated. It pulled it through a spatial query. So that's using other field or those flood zones that we were talking about earlier. And then you can also, you can't edit those kind of guide that user interface towards collecting the correct data. It also takes it out of their hands. So less information for them so they don't have to worry about it. We look at our drop downs. I populated some hydrant information here prior. It's a lot of domain lists and a lot of options. So we can now search through our options and really quickly pick this black hydrant with a white trim. And then this is where the fun begins as we pick the manufacturer. So you see a couple of warnings pop up. Red is generally not a good color in field maps, but in this scenario, it's good. You look at the Mueller option, it's going to say the combination is invalid for the model and the barcode. So we have to go into the model number and we're going to say Mueller. Usually it'd be a list of like 20 of them, but if you select the model here, which it should in a moment, it's going to go through and intuitively figure out what models are related to the Mueller asset. It's going to give you all your options, telling you the Super Centurion and the Modern Centurion are those options, but it also gives you your other options just in case we're showing you that they're not applicable to this asset, which is pretty important. And this is that super secure barcode I was talking about. So I scan this, get that information that's relevant, and it's going to go ahead and capture the rest of that information. So I get that manufacturer information. So again, instead of filling that out and guessing, it's all stored previously using that Python dictionary that Wendy Pelican was talking about earlier. Gets me my pipe diameter, my wall thickness, and then I can come through and figure out the current state of this asset, right? So it does not need, it's unknown if it's operable, and we're going to go ahead and give it a flow of 500 gallons per minute. So really quickly, I was able to update an asset. In this scenario, we were going through and just verifying this information. So that syncs up to that hosted feature service, and then we're going to move on to the inspection component. We can see historical inspections if we so choose. You can click on those. They're listed out in the count of 3. But we're going to complete a new inspection. And right off the bat, it's going to pull in the inspector's name. You'll see that's not mine. That's someone else's. But it pulls that in from your ArcGIS Online account, which is pretty cool. So again, instead of using that domain list and having to pick your name every time, saving seconds over 50 assets over the course of a week, you can save a lot of pretty good time there. So we're going to come through and we're going to see some conditional fields pop up here. So we're going to fill out the pressure, which is the PSI, and we're going to generate some notes. But based on the PSI, it's going to pull up what we need to consider while we're walking through that workflow. So is this stamped? Is it greased, right? Do we need to drain it? Potentially. Then also, what are the requested services that go with this asset? In particular, it's a hydrant. Does it need to be painted? Do we need chains? Is a marker required, right? We're going to fill out 3 of these as yes. And I'm going to say that because when we scroll down, we kind of move past it quick, but that total request auto populates and tells us, is this a high maintenance asset, right? We can't fill that out. It just pulls that from information for us. So creates information from information. It also takes into account your voice recognition. So if you're a big voice to texter like my mother is, this is great for her. She can go ahead and come in and text on the phone and get all the information in at once. So if you go through and say maintenance required, the drain cap has been adjusted, it picks that up very quickly. Again, making you more efficient in the field, and people can listen to what you're doing at the same time. So you can clear out, and we're going to hit X here, and then we're going to sync our edits up because we are in an offline environment. This can be done manually as we're doing now, or it can be synced on a 5-minute interval, 10-minute interval, or whenever you get back in cell connection. Within Queens in particular, the buildings are high, cell connection's a little spotty, so it kind of comes up as is. Now that we've completed one inspection on one hydrant, we're going to navigate to the next. And this is where the fun begins, so you're going to want to watch those notifications come through. So I'm going to orient myself to that next asset using that compass that's in that iPhone or that Android device. And it's going to take a moment, and then we're going to start to move. And we're going to go ahead and turn on my tracks because we are location sharing. And this is the pretty powerful part using geofences for called geo triggers. So you're only going to share your location when we're within a flood zone, right? So I'm going to start to walk here, and it'll start in a moment. Here we go. And you'll start to see that breadcrumb trail that's coming up of where I've been. If you're someone that's in the office, you can see the aggregate of all of this in a track viewer on your team. So you can see 5 at once. You can also change that base map really quickly from the field. And you're going to see these buffers appear around the hydrant. And once we step out of the flood zone and into a fence with another hydrant, it's going to tell us you are nearing your next destination, and it's going to automatically turn off our tracks, right? So I only want to share my location when it's needed, when it's relevant. Think about a project area. I have a city that I'm working in New Jersey, for example, or in North Carolina. I walk within that space. It starts to track my information, share where I am. I leave that. They no longer need that information. So again, really powerful. I can navigate my way through it. And we're back to our PowerPoint presentation slide. So that's perfect. So this field application gives you a lot of maneuverability in the field. It allows you to view your data. It supports a lot of functions. Again, we're talking about that that comprehensive application, right? So you can see over here on the list, we have a lot of things that we're covering. You can view your current location. You can measure things, a lot of good information coming through. In particular, we're showing here, you can get information regarding your assets or events that are happening in the field. So again, incredibly important. We're going to talk a little bit about just offline mapping as well. This is an anonymous map, so you can grab it without an ArcGIS Online account, but this allows you to very quickly go through and gain information about where you've been. So I can get information, favorite spot. I am going to Hawaii in a month on a honeymoon, which is pretty great. But I was going to use this map. I could favorite that volcano and try and navigate my way to that volcano. I'm a GIS guy, so I can do that. Not everyone will, but it's pretty good to have that out in the public and available for people, especially for parks and things of that nature. We can also take a look at the base maps, and I'm not going to stay too long on this slide, but it just shows you the legend information. I always find it helpful because everyone makes maps differently. Some people use reds, some people use greens, but you can come through and quickly see what you're looking at, right? I don't know what that sign is or why highways are in purple. I'm personally a gray, but you can get that information from the legend very quickly and shift your base map appropriately. We're also going to talk about measuring. So I'm a big field mobility person, as people probably know, but if you look in the field, you can create these polygons, lines, or points to measure things, right? And it's really cool is you can take screenshots and share that information, but you can also adjust it to units that are, meaningful to you. I personally like miles, right? But that might not be appropriate for the project that we're working on. Maybe we need acres, right? So you can adjust that so you can very quickly measure these things in the field and on the fly. This one's going to be talking about base maps just for the sake of time. I'm going to quickly migrate through this because I think we will need to move a little quickly just based on the time. This talks about markups, which is an important note. This is what we talked about in the Survey 123 component as well regarding annotation palettes. But if you look at your markups, you can quickly, make meaningful representation in like quick and dirty maps that you can send to other people, right? So you can share these layers with people, and it really closes that gap between being in the field and being in the office. So you can create certain color schemes, you can make them yellow, you can fill them in, and you can also add notes and labels so that these aren't just polygons, points, and lines on a map. So again, making more information and meaningful experiences out of our maps. Capturing and editing data for those of us that have worked in field maps prior is something that's very common. The interface is pretty identical to collector, so if you're holding out, don't worry, you can migrate pretty quickly. But we have domains in here, we have a lot of great fill out forms, and people often mistake this for Survey 123, and the difference is this is a view of your attribute table, but just in a more user-friendly fashion, right? So you can capture these assets and it guides that user through how to collect information, whether it be through domains, single line text fields, however they choose to collect their information. You can also attach media, which is good, but we're going to talk about calculated expressions. In this particular example, we're looking at trees from the tree management solution that's out recently. But you can go through and really quickly see if you put in the circumference of this tree, it's going to auto-calculate the diameter. So you can use those common formulas, or in this scenario, the tree species, right? You can mess with dependent values to, again, guide the users through a meaningful experience, eliminate errors, and make sure that we get the data that we're looking for. So really, circumference is easy to measure, diameter's not as easy, so we're going to auto-calculate that because it can be commonly calculated through some, I think, middle school or high school math, one of the two. I don't know where they teach it now. For this one, we're going to talk about location sharing. A lot of people do not like to share their location, me being one of them, but there is a use case for it. Within field maps, you can share this and you can switch it on or off at whim, and you can also see where you've been by enabling the tracks layer within field maps. A really good use case is what I talked about yesterday. Someone hit my mailbox. I call Yuri at the town of Greenville and I say, hey man, you hit my mailbox. You need to replace that. He turns on his tracks. None of my trucks have been there in the past week. I'm sorry, that wasn't me, right? So it ends up saving you money and arms you with some information so you can make those more location data-driven decisions. These can be duration-based, and I do want to hit on one point before I shift here. The battery saving optimization option is something I learned about a couple months ago. When your location is on, it actually turns down, or it only uses your high accuracy location, so it uses more battery. But when you're standing still, it reads that and stops using your location as highly accurate. So you're not using as much battery when I'm standing, but when I'm moving and pacing back and forth, it's going to say, this guy's moving. I need to track his location just a little bit more. Talking about location sharing, this is now going to show up in your map, right? So it's going to be this My Tracks right here, but it also is going to start showing up on your smartwatches. So you can get these notifications or these pings on those 4, 8, 12-hour intervals based on your Apple Watch. You can adjust that fairly quickly. This one is, one second. So you can see where you've been as well. And this is the fun part that I like to talk about quickly in the field. So you can turn on your tracks. You can see where you've been within the past 4 hours, 8 hours, 72 hours. If you're doing a big field effort, this is important. But if you're just someone using field maps in general, want to see where your team has been, again, equally as important. Talking about offline maps, just on the field maps application itself, you do prepare these prior to going offline, but you download them locally onto your map. You can really quickly define the extent and size of these maps and update them at your own desire, right? So you can sync them manually as we did in the demo, or they can auto sync as soon as you get back into cell phone connection. I was talking with Josh. He was telling me what, 2/3 of Pender County is out of service? A third. So anytime he does work in that third, he needs offline capability so that he can download a map. And when he gets back into that other 2/3 of the county, it's going to sync up and we'll be ready to go and they'll see what he did. Talking about indoor maps, I like indoors personally. It's a pretty neat application, but not everyone wants to go with the full-blown indoors. So if you want to create a quick floor-aware map, Field Maps does support that. So you see up in the top right, you're going to have a floor picker. And that allows you to go through and see quickly by floor where you are, what assets are present, right? And it's just more of a map viewer component. You can come through and quickly generate information or just gain, perspective on where you are within this building. So here at Esri, we have that for all of our campuses. So for everyone that's a new hire, they download ArcGIS Indoors and they can go through and navigate their way to their new office space or their new desk. Talking about the IPS system, if you have a GPS in your phone, but the IPS system makes it a little more accurate in floorware. So it'll give you a higher level of accuracy. So as you're changing floors, it will navigate for you. And so if I'm moving from floor 1 to floor 2, it will shift for me as soon as I hit floor 2, and the IPS kind of recognizes that. Geofences are probably one of the more exciting updates that I've seen in field maps to date. And I've been in the industry for only 10 years. There's probably plenty of other ones that are more exciting, but this allows for triggers. Right now, it's just going for location sharing and location alerts. Am I near an asset? Am I going in or out of the project area? Or if you think about a live stream component, is there a weather event coming, right? It all depends on what you'd like to notify your users of. But as you're entering this area, you will get a notification on your watch or on the phone in the top right there saying you're entering a dog park. So don't think about these as just I'm entering a flood zone or I'm entering a polygon. You can also customize that notification pretty easily. The utility network. So the utility network is now going to be supported within ArcGIS field maps. That's been coming out. So anyone who does have the utility network and you've configured it in Pro prior, it's supported within this platform. So you can do those traces, you can view connectivity, but you will need that utility user type at the end of the day. But you can do a lot of those ever important workflows from your phone and in the field. Now we're going to talk about the web app. And that's not what we wanted right there. All right. So the web application is where we prepare our maps prior to deploying them to the office. So again, think about Survey 123 Connect to the web designer. It's where you customize your user experience. Who is it for? It's going to be those tech savvy people that do know how to go through this process, but it's not just for them. And I want to point that out because it does say that in the slide. It's pretty user friendly. If you get in there and start messing around, you can do some pretty powerful stuff. It has geofences present. It allows you to configure map properties, hide certain fields you don't want a user to interact with, and you can create these smart forms that we're talking about. So I'm going to go through each component of these just so we can see from the get-go. The first is form authoring. And a smart form, as I mentioned, is really similar to Survey 123, but it serves a different purpose. It's just meant to be in the same application instead of navigating it. But out of the get-go, a smart form will read the entire attribute table. So if you have 64 fields in your attribute table, it's going to read all 64. If you only want Yuri to see 2 of them, you have to go into this portion of the application and just drag and drop those 2 into the smart form. You can save templates, you can create smart expressions, calculated expressions, dependent values, and again, make it pretty intuitive for the end user. We do see a lot of form elements within ArcGIS field maps. So you see a couple of these mimic what we see in Survey 123, but we see those date time values, those numbers that are double, those integers, right, and text and drop down boxes. So I don't want you to think you have one hand to hide behind your back when you're working with this type of platform. It's pretty flexible. You can do just about everything that you're looking for. And you can also create those field groups. So if you want to guide that user as they're going through it, you can. This might be the same slide. Form expressions are pretty fun. Who in this room has used Arcade before? Okay, so we have a good chunk in the crowd, hopefully the same on the virtual environment. But if you look at this, you can create these forms on the fly. And everyone always thinks Arcade is a difficult language, and in some ways it is. But luckily for you, we built an expression builder. So you can walk through and have this guided user interface tell you how to input variables, what you're looking for. So even if you're new to this platform, you can still configure a meaningful form. In this scenario, you can save these expressions across the entire field maps application. So if you're working with one map and you have an expression you want to use in multiple places, like who is editing the data or now function to pull date and time, you can do that as well. We also have conditional visibility represented, and you can do this the same way with Arcade, and it's stored within the map. So you can apply if hydrant needs inspection, show me these next 5 fields, right? If someone reported an incident of a pothole, please give me the 5 required fields that go with it. But if they don't report a pothole, show me different fields. So again, guides that user experience in a very intuitive way. The geofence component, if you can see it, it's very slight up in the black here on the left, is the third from the bottom when you're in the web app builder or web app configure for the ArcGIS field maps. You can create these yourself manually if you so choose, but looking at the demo that I did earlier and a couple other examples I've seen in our work, using existing layers is pretty powerful. So you can use those flood inundation zones, you can use or create an analysis, a buffer surrounding an asset, right, to make that user experience a little more friendly. You can also configure on the right the type of action that's triggered and the message that they're going to get. So sometimes you want them to say, hey, you're entering a dog park. Hey, you're entering a dog park and you're exiting the project area. Please come back, right? So you can customize that and get that notification and create that action behavior really quickly. Talking about offline maps, this is a really consolidated and user-friendly way to get ready to go in those areas like Pender County, right, with a third of the area outside of cell coverage. You can create and manage these on your phone. And as I mentioned, sync back up at your leisure. And it really helps with enabling people to take their maps offline and complete data in those sensitive places. So when you do this, you come in and you're going to generate a space. You can manage the size yourself if you'd like. I wouldn't recommend doing a whole county. Try and break it up by piecemeal if you can. Make sure it's manageable. And there is a certain limit there as far as how much you can download. But you can really customize this experience. Make sure what features are editable, what features are read-only. Really powerful stuff. The mobile app settings has been something I haven't messed too much with, but it's still equally as important. As you're guiding your user through a project workflow and they're editing this data, you can do a lot of things, right? So a quick one off this bullet point is enable snapping. So that's a quick little trigger right on the back end of the data set or the map here. So you can see right here on the picture. But if we didn't have snapping on, all of a sudden editing becomes a little bit more difficult, right? So if you can go through and configure this on the back end, that's really powerful. Looking at GPS averaging and photo upload size, you can also manage your data. So if I don't want someone collecting data with a GPS average of 200 feet, I can guide them through that workflow, right? I can also adjust the level of detail that they have in the map. So again, a lot of control here on the back end, but again, this is all done on the website as you're preparing that user for that field mobile experience. And then sharing settings. This is very similar to ArcGIS Online. You can share it at the organizational level. You can share it just yourself within a group, or you can go public. You can also do anonymous mapping with field maps, which I feel is a underrepresented feature within field maps. So you can put QR codes all throughout a park as you're going through an event. These public users do not have ArcGIS Online logins. They just scan the QR code and they can see everything they'd like to. I had a great example out of Florida for a golf event. Where can I buy my $100 polo? That's what I'm looking for, right? So I can scan a QR code and go through and say, there's that photo booth, or the more important question, where can I get a cold beer, right? The really important stuff. So I apologize again, we went through a little fast, but I'm going to talk about learning and we were a little close on time. A lot of people don't know the full capabilities of field maps, and you can very easily gain a lot of learning capabilities just through these pages. So we have a product page here. You can come through, scroll through these bite-sized learning lessons and really get started. So I want to drive home that all the things that I've talked about today, the plenary, and if you've talked with me previously, you can almost hit about 90% of those on this webpage. How do I configure hydrant inspections? There's also an alternative page that's learn.arcgis.com, which gets those bite-sized lessons, because sometimes those learn lessons get a little long and we want to make sure we can do it quickly. I'm going to talk about, similar to the Survey 123 demo, we're going to talk about what's new. So what's come out recently, because I feel like we haven't been together in a while. So we've talked about those smart forms and those geofences and those indoor capabilities. But we also, I didn't mention linear referencing is coming out to field maps for those DOT groups. That's going to be pretty important. We also talk about GPS metadata for lines and polygons. So for a lot of us, we collect points. We get GPS metadata with that. Now we can do that for polygons and lines as well, which is going to be pretty great. And then the best slide is always the roadmap. And I think I did a personal favorite. So I'll leave this here for a little bit. I'm going to talk on these three because these are what's meaningful to me, but I always like to grab pictures of these slides. So the near term, again, is stuff that we have identified and we're releasing soon. Midterm is going to be identified a need. We're developing a solution and it's going to be coming out probably within the next 1 to 2 release cycles. And then you look at long term, that means we identified a need, we're working to get that together. Everything my customers are waiting for is the first bullet point on the midterm, which is the workforce coordination. So if you use ArcGIS Workforce today for your task management software, that's going to be rolled into field maps. So I'm going to continue to pick on Yuri because he came in and he's sitting in the back, but I assigned 5 tasks to Yuri. He has to open Workforce now, and then he migrates into field maps, right? Now he'll just be able to log into field maps and see the 5 things that he has to do today, which is go collect data or go edit information or complete a task. You look at the data collection, a lot of the similar stuff we see in Survey 123 is coming out. We're going to see drawing nodes, nested data collection, and photo markup. We talked about that as well as the orthometric heights coming in. So we can do some pretty cool stuff there, as well as offset capture, which is pretty fun. The last one, I don't have a lot of information on, I will openly admit that, but the long-term camera and LiDAR capabilities is really exciting, especially with the iPhone getting as powerful as it can, or as powerful as it has been. Incorporating those machine learning capabilities and data capture methods is going to be pretty great. So you take a picture and you're going to be able to use that moving forward. So for the person who asked me in the last session if that personal information filter is coming to field maps, that might be that. So that'll be pretty great. So again, I apologize. We went through this a little earlier with some technical issues, but I'll open it up for questions for about 10 minutes. And I'm going to migrate between Todd for the technical questions that are online and then out in the audience. We'll start in the audience real quick. All right. Rapid fire field maps was digested well. Perfect. Perfect. Do you have any on your end? Yes, that was on the field maps roadmap earlier. So editing multiple features will be available in the midterm. So if you want, his question was if you want to be able to edit multiple features, select multiple hydrants, manholes, whatever you're doing, and batch edit them, that will be coming soon. So the question was, is there going to be future support for nested values? On that roadmap, there was support for nested values in the midterm. So it's going to be coming out within the next 1 to 2 release cycles. Specifically regarding his attribute rule question, I'm not 100% sure what's included in that update, but I can get more information on that. I recommend looking into the ArcGIS Field Maps documentation page for some more information. Did you have a question right here in the center left? Okay. Yes. So the question is, do the forms have smart logic? And they do. You can use those conditional values to kind of create those smart default values that you're looking for. And that's what we talked about in those earlier GIFs or animations, so to speak. You know, they look grayed out and they auto-populate a value, so you can make them read only, or you can say that smart value is actually wrong. I need to adjust that, but you can make them as intuitive as you'd like using Arcade and conditional visibility. Any other questions? Going once, twice? Oh, yep. So the question is, can you do conditional visibility on related records? My question for your question is, do you want to do it in the related record itself, or explain to me your workflow a little bit? Oh, yes. Okay. So the question is, can you do conditional visibility on a related record? Yeah, you can. So that is available on the parent record level and the child record, I think is what it's called, the child record level. So if you go through and do a hydrant inspection, you can apply those same levels of visibility and calculated expressions as well within the Field Maps web application. So in preparation to go to the field. Awesome. No question is a silly question. All right. Going once, twice, sold. Thanks, everyone.